To all the viewers, welcome to Rishabh University presents I.I.M.U.N's Classroom to Career series, where we help make your career choices a little easier by getting professionals to come in and talk to you. Now, you'll be wondering, saying, what are we doing on my profile? Well, there's a surgery being conducted on the I.I.M.U.N profile, so that is why we're here on my profile country. But today we have with us somebody to talk about surgery and healthcare generally. He's an Indian surgeon who was the founder of Digestive Health Institute. He's performed surgeries on absolutely everybody, right from Nitin Gadkari to Venkaiah Naidu, the Vice President of India. But sir, Dr. Muffi, I must tell you, you've not made it in life till you performed a surgery on Abhishek. It's impossible to get him to do anything. But this fellow is a gold medalist he's been a gold medalist right through his career. And more so, apart from the many accolades, one can keep talking about the work he's done. But apart from the accolades, the reason why I'm so happy to have him here is in COVID, and Shobit, you must know this, in COVID, young people wrote to him and said, Dr. Muffi, we're doing this thing called Find a Bed, where we're trying to build a repository of COVID centers. And then we want to actually build COVID centers. Now, he has no clue he did not know who I was, and of course he wishes that that remained the same. But these young people just wrote to him and he said, okay, what are you guys doing? You will need some counseling and some guidance. I'm happy to do it pro bono for you. And we set up COVID centers all the way from Junjunu to Orissa. And the man who actually, gave us all the advice and tried to make things happen was Dr. Muffi. Dr. Muffi, it's been a pleasure, honor, and the privilege to be able to do this session on healthcare with you. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Rishabh. Thank you for all these flowery words. And when I actually speak, people realize that I'm not really worth all that great praise that you've showered on me. But it's great to see you again.
And talking about saving lives, you're very humble. And talking about humility and saving lives, somebody who's also impacting lives. He's probably the youngest Vice Chancellor that we have in all of India. And therefore, I'm thrilled and delighted to be able to welcome co-founder and Vice Chancellor of Rishabh University, Shobit. Shobit Mathur, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rishabh. Thank you for having me over.
And the good part is Shobit has joined Instagram. So all you guys who are watching, please go and show some love to him. He's just joined Insta. But let me start with the first question, Dr. Muffi. Healthcare is all about serving other people. And is this something that came naturally to you when, you were making your career choices saying, I want to be a healthcare professional, I want to be a doctor? Or was it like what happens in typical Indian households, where as soon as you are born, your parents decide saying, ye chartered accountant banega, ye lawyer banega, and ye doctor banega. Was it that, or was it something that came to you naturally?
So first and foremost, I would like to tell you, Shobit, that it's not good for your health to join Instagram. So though you joined it, try and get off it.
I'll take that advice seriously.
Now coming to why I chose one profession that you missed, Rishabh, from saying every Indian wants to be, is to be a cricketer. And I almost ended up becoming one. And I just wasn't as great as Sachin or probably Vinod, who were my friends at that point of time. And I did play a little bit of cricket but I decided that if it was not going to be a superstar in cricket, I might as well try my hand at medicine. And I wanted to be a surgeon. I wanted to be a GI surgeon, and that's what I am. And I have no regrets, actually, frankly, no regrets at taking this career choice at all.
How lovely. So from cricket, how did you go to healthcare? How was that transition? How did that take place?
It was just the easiest catch to catch at that point of time, so I took it. But I got into JJ Hospital. Sorry.
No, sorry, go on, please go on.
No, since I got into JJ Hospital, so I had to decide between Wankhede Stadium or to JJ Hospital. I took the easier choice. I said, how wrong can I get? And that time there was no IPL. Maybe, just maybe, if there was IPL at that point of time, my career choice might have been different. You never know. But then I would
probably then we would have seen
the show.
No, but then we would have got you on the show in another category. But I'm delighted you chose to open and you chose to play with the front foot when it came to the field of medicine, and because we need people such as you. But tell me now, you spoke about, getting into college and, pursuing this. There are about 562 colleges, if I'm not wrong, which are government authorized, that essentially have about 87 odd thousand seats that young people can apply to. But there are 8 lakh people, Dr. Muffi, who apply for these NEET examinations. They get through the NEET examinations. The biggest problem that I've seen, and if you see Ukraine as well, all the people who were in Ukraine, majority of the students were Indian students. Now, Dr. Muffi, the issue is that all of us know the problem since decades, that we need to increase the number of medical colleges. But ye kyun nahi ho raha hai? What is going wrong, and how should we address it? Because a lot of people make the mistake of watching these lives. Sometimes parliamentarians and some who've passed out from I.I.M.U.N are now in government. So some of them will probably see this. And what would you say to them? How can we change the system?
I think what the government of India has done really well is to give medical education at a very, very low rate, right? Today, I think we might be one of the cheapest levels of paying for your medical seat. I mean, none of us really paid any fees as compared to what you would pay abroad. The other thing is, if you look at the American system, it's an apex system, right? It's a pyramidal system where if you match a program, if you're a local, you'll make it. We have 1.4 billion people. So there are bound to be 80 lakh odd people applying for every NEET exam. It's not possible for all of them to get in. I think to me, and I'm not a government guy, I probably never will become a government guy post this statement of mine, but I think that at some point of time, our privileged system of granting seats to SC, ST, and various other people who get less than half the percentage of marks that someone who struggled to get 90-95% will get should be abolished. I think at some point, maybe give them the MBBS seats, but stop at that point. Don't give them the MS and the MD and everything, because if you want quality doctors passing out, you need, and if you realize that most of our brain drain has happened, some of the best doctors in Europe, in UK, in US are Indian. So we've lost a lot of that brain drain. Let's not make it a point that most of the good talent from India, again, passes out after studying here. So I think you owe it to the medical system here to stay here and to study here. And if you've studied here, to come back wherever you've done really well, to come and do. Today, I must tell you, Rishabh, that the medical system pays us well as well. So it's not as if the olden times where we weren't getting paid. So if you're top of the lot, you get paid well. Maybe not as insane as the cricketers and the actors do, but at least you get paid well enough to survive well enough. I think what the government should also do is take a quasi-judicial rule in the sense that do partnership models with some private setups so that they don't bear the entire burden. At the same time, take away the dubiousness of private medical colleges where they charge money to get medical seats. So if the government steps in, you would have the government monitoring their admission profile. At the same time, the private players can charge an X amount of money, which is doable, which will be more than the government colleges, but wherein they will admit more and more people, you get more and more doctors, and that's the need of the hour. Because I believe that if you want to bridge the gap between rural and urban healthcare, you need more doctors. You don't need to do bridging exams, which I'm completely against, bridging exams between Ayurveda doctors and homeopathy doctors and Unani doctors, and try and make them allopathic doctors, because they are very good with what they do. Ayurveda is a great branch of medicine. Allopathy is a great branch of medicine. Unani and homeopathy has its own pros and cons. But we should not try and bridge the gap. It's only because of the lack of doctors, lack of nurses, that we're trying to bridge this gap. So the government's looking for solutions. I think one of the young, bright kids at I.I.M.U.N would probably suggest a solution which the government would buy into and try and get more doctors who are more adept at treating rural and urban tribal healthcare.
And young people from I.I.M.U.N keep giving senseless and sensible solutions, but I think today we have somebody. Today we have you giving the suggestion, so I'm pretty sure that they're going to take it even more seriously. That said, you mentioned a very important point. You said that, the government must partner with private universities in order to offer much more in terms of seats. Because at the end of the day, you are having a brain drain. And like you said, the best doctors overseas are Indians per se. And I don't necessarily blame them, because, you have a better quality of life in their cases. That's why they pursue education and then they stay put out there. Plus the costs are draconianly high. The kind of donations that are required. I know some people who studied in affluent schools in South Bombay, who've actually, rather than paying a truckload of money, they've gone overseas and pursued education. And that's why let me come to Shobit and ask you, Shobit, this, that what are you doing at Rishi to reverse this trend? I know you're having healthcare as one of the electives that are possible to be, that young students can take. But beyond that, is there anything that you're planning to do?
Yeah, thanks, Rishabh. I think that's a very pertinent question, especially like when you are saying the brain drain and the bulk of our students going abroad. In fact, I did the same after graduating from IIT Bombay. I mean, if you have to pursue a master's or a PhD, we didn't find quality institutions in the country at that time. So even I went abroad, studied at the University of Washington in Seattle. And as Dr. Muffi is saying, I came back to serve the country. But what we have done, I hope that the next generation doesn't have to go through that. Can we provide high quality, affordable education in our country, right? And Dr. Muffi has given an example of how we can do it through public-private partnership, but it also is a responsibility of private institutions. So what we see and the kind of image we have of private institutions is they are profit-making, right? Though legally they are supposed to be non-profit, and education is seen to be a business now. How do we fundamentally change this, right? I think at Rishihood, that is an attempt that when we say non-profit, we genuinely are non-profit in the sense that can we not use education to milk the students and draw out profits, but genuinely provide them high quality education at very affordable rates. So at Rishihood, yes, I think that's a fair question. How are we able to do this, or how are we trying to do this? Scholarships, and scholarships not just by seeing means, but also merit and means. So, and trying to have a fair and transparent process in identifying the right talent and supporting them and providing them good quality education and also subsidizing their education. But that being said, I think at a larger perspective, when we look at students not as ways of revenue, but as seeing them as who are going to contribute back to society. If we see students not as customers, but see them as genuinely learners, who are potential nation builders, then our perspective about them changes. And this is the idea we take to our donors as well, because ultimately somebody has to pay for this education, right? And surprisingly, there are a lot of people out there who really want to support young talent. And if Rishihood can do the job of identifying this talent, they're willing to support it through scholarships. So on one side, we work with a lot of donors and raise donations that eventually covers the cost of the students' fees, and at the same time provide high quality education, and not using this to also fund or give it back to the funders or in terms of profits. So we are able to design a program like that, and I would encourage ones who want to consider good quality education in India at affordable rates to also look at how Rishihood is able to provide it. It's still a model work in progress, but I'm sure that if it works out, it will going to be an amazing way for bringing private philanthropists and good quality education together. Yeah.
Sure. So you're saying that you are going to try to offer more and more scholarships so that young deserving people can basically apply to university directly, and they don't need to necessarily go to the Ukraines of the world in order to try to get education per se. Because the sad part was, and let me just bring this back to Dr. Muffi as well, is that Dr. Muffi, it's what happens, and what I have observed as well, to get into an Ivy League school and to get into a medical college, it's tougher to get into a medical college. The acceptance rates are much, much tougher. And therefore, some of our brightest minds, like you rightly said, are going overseas. Now, one part of it has to do with the fact that there is lack of opportunity. But the other, and you may be able to throw more light on this, is the quality of education that is imparted. A lot of people, and I don't understand much of healthcare, therefore I need you to elucidate on this. They say that despite India being, we having the Charaka Samiti, or we being Shushruth being the father of surgery, the idea is that despite India being in a numero uno position in the years that have gone by, today academia in India for healthcare is not to the levels that it is in its Western counterparts, that is, say, in the United States of America, Europe, and other places. Is this correct? What are your thoughts on this?
I think we've got only ourselves to blame. I think I would be part of that entire regime that says that we've trained here, but we unfortunately have not given it back to our younger lot, and we should keep trying that. So I keep trying to educate more and more students and keep trying to get that better. There are two parts to this, right? One is your medical colleges, and the medical colleges are suffering from an apathy wherein they're not allowing the good full-time, they're only full-timers. They're not allowing the honoraries, which was hitherto a thing of the past. Like when I trained, there were lots of honoraries. The honoraries would come in 1-2 days. They were the best doctors in Bombay City. They would come and impart their education, and the full-timers would also be there. So you got the best of both worlds. Now we've abolished that honorary system. So we have only the full-timers. Sometimes, unfortunately, the full-timers know that they probably won't make it into the private. So they hang around there in the government and municipal hospitals for the longest period of time. And it might not be the best thing for them, for the students to see. The next thing is research. In terms of research, the government hardly ever funds any kind of serious medical research, like the NHS, right? Or in America, half the funding comes from the government. The other half comes from, let's say, if you apply for a grant for any research funding, that has to be done. Again, our publications are not really A grade or A+ grade any longer. So we have to keep working hard at it. And we produce science of the best quality. We've got the best scientists, we've got the best doctors. So why can't we do that? Sometimes it's about our apathy that we've got so used to private practice and so used to treating people and so many people that sometimes we let our scientific brains take a little backseat and say, okay, I'm doing this job now, I don't really have time for anything else. But until we don't publish, we will perish. So I think that research has to be a very, very significant part, which the government should concentrate on. All medical colleges should have significant level of research, which the government should somehow fund. I don't know how it's going to be possible. That's why I'm never going to be a politician. But somehow they have to find a way.
That's why you're never going to be a politician, but you can do very well in the field of education, especially when it comes to advising politicians as to what should be done with the medical infrastructure in our country. Just listening to you, honestly, and I've listened to all the rabble-rousers, unfortunately, as I call some of them, and they make little sense when it comes to dispensing the correct advice. What you said is very true, that research in our country, again, has no funding coming in from government, or for that matter, the funding even from the private sector is very limited. Let me take this to Shobhit. Shobhit, what are you doing about research? Because see, all of these fancy universities are being set up. There's the Ashoka in Delhi, then you've got the Jindals and so on and so forth. Research ke baare mein aap kya kar rahe ho? Because research at the end of the day is that building block on which you are going to be able to build a solid curriculum and a solid academia going forward.
Yeah, I think Rishabh, fair question. I think, as Dr. Muffi rightly said, without research, how will you be globally competitive, right? We can speak about our past, we can speak about the past glories. That's all valid. But then if we have to remain cutting edge in the current times, we also obviously have to stay up to date and do the best. So research is like the building block of any good academic institution. Yes, government funding has been lacking, particularly in primary sectors like this, like healthcare, like in education. We don't have as much. So yeah, while we can keep whining about can we get more government funding, and they should be doing it, yes. But how, I think as private sector as well, when I see the philanthropists, most of the contribution as corporate social responsibility or as individual donations is primarily going to very immediate causes, right? You may build a school, you may build a road, you may provide water, but then eventually you also have to think of the future and invest on research. So we need to ask the private sector as well, while we question our politicians and the government, that where are we investing? Because unless that happens, how are we going to solve the problems of the future as well, right? So we would definitely want to see more private sector funding coming into research. That's one. And to your audience out there, I think how many of us are developing that research aptitude? Because we, through our education system itself, the deficit of having attention, the deficit of working on a single problem doggedly for too long, that's an attitude as well that we need to develop. I think somewhere our education system is also falling short. We are constantly looking for possibly shortcuts, quick success, quick professional growth. But research is not like that, and Dr. Muffi can attest to this, that it requires single-minded, dedicated focus on a particular problem for long. I think we need to start developing that attitude as well. We need to see the private sector also investing into research, because in the West, if you look at it, right, many big academic institutions are not only government funded, but also a lot of big philanthropic foundations are putting their money into it. I think we are yet to see, it's the initial stages, we are still encouraging science, but I think a long way to go in terms of getting private sector funding into this. together along with the government funding, I think we can do well. But totally very, very important. Without research, we're not going to get there.
Very true. Without research, we're not going to get there. But before it becomes a sermon for the business leaders and the politicians, and they wonder, saying, Rishabh, wasn't this supposed to be helping young people make career choices? Let me get back to some of the experiences that Dr. Muffi would have had, because I know, you mentioned that you, just like every young person in the country, wanted to try your hand at cricket, that you wanted to be a cricketer, but you chose to take up a job which essentially has no, end time. Even at 3 a.m. in the morning, you could be woken up and you could be told, saying that, there's a surgery or there's something that needs to be done. And you have no choice but to do that. So isn't this more than a career decision? Isn't this like a life choice, where essentially your work is becoming your life?
So I think you should be passionate about whatever you do. And if you're passionate about something, you never seem to work a day, right? You're woken up at 2 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon. You want to do that thing. You never grumble about the late hours. You never do. Like, I've just finished a workshop for some 8 international surgeons, and that's why I got delayed joining in this. But I have no regrets about it. So I think what we really need to do is, let's find our passion. Let's not get into a profession because everybody else is telling us to get into that profession. If you're passionate about it, please do it. If you're not passionate about it, get out. Right now is the time. There'll be something else you might find passion with. Maybe art, maybe music, maybe. And today young kids are very lucky. You've got a plethora of choices to choose from, right? It's not like my mom used to say, doctor banega, engineer banega, ya hajam banega. I became a hajam in some form. I still end up shaving some of my patients on table. But that, jokes aside, I still think the most important thing is to find your passion. Because if you found your passion, whether it's in medicine, whether it's in whatever else you do, please try and chase that. Yeah.
Find your passion, and these days you're lucky in order to choose from a plethora of choices, like what you said. The new education policy, in fact, focuses on multidisciplinary learning. It focuses on the fact that you can study science and you can also simultaneously study business. And the amalgam of the two is actually possible. And I envy some of the ones who are actually teenagers today as they're making their life choices, saying it's possible to do a minor in history and a major in physics. Though, of course, I never had the aptitude for physics, but at least I could have done the history part along with some other subject. Let me take this to Shobit and ask you, Shobit, multidisciplinary approach is great, but you're a liberal arts university who's offering something like healthcare. Yet, what's the logic behind it? Because it, to a normal viewer, it seems like how did a liberal arts university get into something like healthcare?
Yeah, thanks, Rishabh. I think before that, I also want to address on the career choice itself, and I want to congratulate you for choosing health and education in the same panel, because perhaps the two most important, domains of public life that we can contribute in. Because as my role, right, what am I passionate about? I'm passionate about creating the next generation, right? And I think that is possibly the best contribution I think I can make to society. Because unless we keep producing good generation after generation of high quality talent that can contribute to the society, as a civilization, will stop existing. So I think that has been my personal passion, and that's why also it keeps me up at night. That being said, education is definitely undergoing a huge overhaul, and because I constantly meet young people asking, why are we studying what we are studying? How is it even relevant, right? How is what I'm learning in the classroom even relevant to society's problems? Because we have reached the stage, particularly post-pandemic and during the pandemic, that unless we take a multidisciplinary approach to solving problems, it's not going to work. So we may look at the pandemic in one way, but it's also a healthcare problem. It's also a technology problem. It's also a sociology problem. It's a political problem. It's a geopolitical problem in many ways. So it is, if you don't get this context, right, if you don't see the same issue from different dimensions, you're not going to be able to address it. So that is what we have realized at Rishabh. And fortunately, we are just getting started off. So we don't have a lot of sunk costs in the ways we have been. So we can design novel programs that are genuinely relevant in addressing society's problems. So we have the tagline of Rishihood is it's a social impact university. It is perhaps India's first and only social impact university. So we're driven by impact. So if you look at the big challenges of the society today, right from climate change to mental depression to maybe technology and the way it's progressing, and the different issues that society is facing, it is, you have to take a 360-degree perspective, and Dr. Muffi will attest to that. So what he's doing in the surgery room is also a lifestyle problem. It's also an education problem. It's also a nutrition problem. So if you don't get this perspective, how are you going to address it? I think that is where people are finding education to be irrelevant, because it is getting specialized into one domain and you see that it is not having any relevance the global context. So I think that's the approach that we have taken. That is why, though we are liberal, we are also focused on impact, and they both go together. You can't have one without the other. So you don't, I mean, if you want to create impact, you have to take a multidisciplinary approach, and that's the reason we have chosen this path. Yeah.
If you want to create impact, you have to take a multidisciplinary approach. This is something like what my school teacher told me, only if I actually paid attention in class, you know. Well, but the good part about this conversation that I really liked is that we're trying to get real life insights. And if I may ask the last question before I move to some frivolity that is associated with this show, is to Dr. Muffi, what would you say has been the best moment in your professional life? If I were to ask you, saying, you know, the best moment in your professional life, if you had to zero it down to any one, what would that be?
You know, it was actually, I've got lots and lots of these moments during my surgical career, but the one moment that defines it is during my COVID, actually. And I never claimed to be, never was, and never will be a COVID expert. But I just stepped out and put my hand up in the time when I think my city needed me. I love Bombay too much. Couldn't see it burning. And when Mumbai had the largest number of cases, the first red zones, Worli was there. So I just stepped up and said, let me help. And that's when I took a sabbatical. So there are two things I wanted to remove. One was fear around the disease and stigma associated with the disease, right? So there was this 80-year-old lady who during the first phase of COVID, was there. She was in our NSCI facility, and she thought she'd probably die every single day because she had heard everybody had told her, "Tu jana rahe tithe, tu parat nahi yena rahe." So everyone had kind of almost told her that this is your last journey. They had said their byes, everything, because everyone thought COVID would kill her. So the first thing she thought is that no doctor would come and sit next to her, right? Because that was the perception. So I wore my PPE suit, I wore my mask, and first thing I went and hugged her and I said, "Ai tu gabru nako, mi tula gari paatu." So when I told her that, she was like overjoyed, and every day she would keep some meal aside. Of course, I couldn't bring my mask down and eat with her, but I would make sure that, because food never transmitted the virus, but I would make sure that whatever blessings she had prayed something. And the funny part is that everyone's gods are different, but today everyone was praying to one God that was to go save her life, right? And she would leave something for me. I would take it outside. I would have a Shah, have whatever she left for me, and I could actually send her home. So for me, that is the greatest moment. I don't even know her. She doesn't know my name. She could never see my face. She probably won't even recognize me when I go out. Nobody came to me because I was Dr. Muffi, the surgeon. Everyone came to me because I was this man in the white with a mask who nobody could recognize, but who would probably help them save their life. So COVID really, really taught me a lot.
You were the man, you were the frontline warrior in all of Bombay. Everywhere you would look, there was Dr. Muffi with the mask, but we can recognize you. And I am so grateful that we have people like you. Honestly, it was... Bombay was much better, and I know lots of people in the political fraternity and even otherwise who are very, very grateful for your selfless service, long hours, and trying to help people who you didn't even know, including I.I.M.U.N, and that's how we met you. So, so thank you for that. And to all the people who are confused about which career to take, the one little thing that I picked up from this conversation is, I don't think there is a profession that is more noble than this one. Because quite honestly, when he was talking about, you could see the excitement in his eyes. So when he was talking about doing this in COVID, it was the sense of satisfaction was coming through. And whenever I ask people, and Dr. Muffi, biggest of the politicians and music stars and cricketers have come on I.I.M.U.N. And when I ask them, what's the big moment in your life? They say the Oscars or winning the World Cup and things like that. But the gleam is not there. And the gleam was there in your eye because that's a life that you've actually saved. And that's something, I don't think there is anything more noble than that. But before it gets too serious, I'm inspired by a person who I look up to and a friend who does this with a coffee mug on his show. We have no hamper to give as such. But let me just quickly do a small rapid fire before I let the two of you go. And starting with Dr. Muffi, what's the first thought that comes to your mind when I say healthcare? When I say the word healthcare, what's the first thought that comes to your mind?
Something that I do for a living.
When I say classroom, what's the first thought that comes to your mind, Shobit?
Curiosity.
When I say career, Dr. Muffi, what's the first thought?
Always medicine.
Always medicine. When I say India, Shobit, what's the first thought?
Spirituality.
Spirituality. And when I say youth, at that juncture, what's the thought that comes to your mind, Dr. Muffi?
The whole world, whole life is in front of you. Just choose your path correctly.
And because we end it with this always, when I say I.I.M.U.N. Shobit, what's the first thought that comes?
A network of change makers.
Instagram was saying, don't lie so much. That's why my video went off.
Fact check.
But it's been a pleasure to be able to have this conversation with Dr. Muffi and Shobit. Thank you very much for taking our time and actually doing this.